Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonics Technologies. In this lecture we're going to be taking a look at shortcuts and mostly how to set them up. There's over 200 shortcuts in Illustrator. So as you can see here, and I just took this from Adobe's website, it's easiest to look at the shortcuts by customizing them. If you just read the top 3 paragraphs here, and this paragraph right here about saving shortcuts, you can just save these without having to go through all this. But if you're setting up a new version of Illustrator, for example, or if you're setting it up on a new computer and you want to take those shortcuts, just look for the KYS file, and it's usually easy just to search for it. The default shortcut to get into the shortcuts is Alt-Shift-Control-K. You can also access it here in the menu under Edit. And if you go through, you're probably familiar with most of these. But just go ahead and go into this and take a look at all the different shortcuts. I've gone over some of the more important ones. Anything with a single letter in the default Illustrator shortcuts is generally viewed to be important, or an individual tool which you'll use repeatedly. There's some that I don't use a whole lot, like I use Reflect a lot, but I use the context menu. But you might want to change these around, and it's a good idea generally to change them around before you get too used to them. I know in Photoshop this opacity settings are set to the number keys, the actual number keys above the letters in the keyboard. It's set to 1 for 10%, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, but in Illustrator it's not that important. So aside from these, there's some unmentioned shortcuts that I'm going to go into. And if you also notice, obviously there's a lot of non-assigned commands. So if there's a command that's a menu command or tool, you can generally find it here. But what I'm going to do is just paste some of the most helpful shortcuts and the ones that you're probably unaware of that end up helping the most. And this entire list I got from a site, and this is the website. And if you just do a Google search for shortcuts and that kind of thing, you'll find, with the words most useful, stuff like that, you'll find lists like this. And just going through them, there'll be certain things that you'll see that you'll have people that have already gone through the trouble of highlighting all of these things, and this is a particularly good one. It starts right here and select faster. It's from this site that I put in pink. So V and A are the black tool and the white selection tool you can see here. And I use those all the time to switch back and forth. Same with this select all and deselect all, which is very useful. And you might have hit D before and noticed that it makes an object the default fill and stroke. And if you've used Photoshop, then you know about X, and if you see I'm pressing X right now and it's just changing whichever one that I would be editing. If I were changing the colors and I wanted to change the stroke and I had it selected, I would just change it, and then if I wanted to change the fill, I'd hit X and then just hit another color. But Shift X will actually invert the colors of the object you have selected. So if you just read through this or go to this site and see some of these, you'll see, I think it's a pretty good collection of what the most useful shortcuts are. Especially useful is Command B, F, and B. When you have an object selected, and I press Control F, it'll paste it in its original place. Control V, Control X, Control B. Very important in terms of order, and Control Shift V places the object directly where you cut it from, whereas Control V just pastes it onto the screen relative to the screen. These are really useful. The Shift Command brackets for order. Holding Shift generally multiplies things, so if I'm changing a variable and I'm holding Shift and pressing up, it'll go up by 10. First it'll go up to the nearest 10, or down, depending which way I'm pressing, and then it will just go up by 10. Same with a stacking order, for example. I have all these boxes that I just made, and they keep their stacking order no matter where I move them. This one I can move forward by pressing Control left and right brackets, respectively. If I do Control Shift right bracket, brings it all the way to the front. Control Shift left bracket brings it all the way to the back. So Shift is kind of intuitive when it comes to Illustrator shortcuts. As well, Command and Alt can be kind of intuitive, but Shift is the more predictable one. Just pressing Alt in any tool will bring up an alternate tool. Particularly useful is the pencil tool. So when you have that, which is shortcut key N, and you want the smooth tool, which they're very useful to use right next to each other, because you'll be going back and forth in between the two. When you have a tool like the rectangle tool or any of the shape tools, Alt will make the shape come out from the middle. Holding in Shift will keep it proportional. And I've gone over these in the other videos as well. But just understanding what Alt and Command does is pretty important. So whenever you have any tool selected and you hit Command, you're going to bring up the direct selection tool. When you have the direct selection tool up, and when I say hit, I mean hold it. When you have it up, if you hold in Alt, you'll get the group selection tool. With Command and Alt held in, you can drag things and make copies of them. And then, of course, whenever you're dragging or moving anything, Shift goes from its typical multiplier function to keeping things aligned. I'm holding in Shift right now. It obeys constraint angle. And you'll get a lot of this from the first few videos. But if not, just take a look at this list and take a look at some of the other Illustrator lists. Type in words like must and most important, things like that, to find best kind of lists, and you'll see things that you'll recognize as being something you use a lot. In the shortcuts, you'll learn them a lot faster that way. So aside from that, it's really about all there is to it. There's a few on here that I actually haven't seen before, like Command 4, Control 4, and it'll say Command on this one in particular. This is for a Mac. I guess it puts the Windows one in brackets. So, but repeat the last applied Pathfinder function, which something they put in obviously because they determined it was useful. And like I said, there's so many. There's 200 regular shortcuts, and there's actually more than that when you combine them. And you combine everything, there's got to be about 1,000 shortcuts. So there's some you'll never use, and there's some that you will. So take a look at this, and you'll start to get the general gist of it as you go on. But instead of learning or assigning a shortcut for the smooth tool and stuff like that, instead of making your rectangles and then aligning them to the center of whatever you want, you can do those kind of things with Alt Control. So learn those and learn how those affect each tool. Whenever you have a tool up, hit Alt, hit Control, see what happens. Like I said, Alt's going to generally bring up the alternate version of the tool, and Control will always bring up the direct selection tool if you have something else selected. And if you have the direct selection tool selected, it'll bring up the selection tool. Also, you can bring them up, and that's just holding it in. You can bring them up permanently with A and B, like I said. So take a look at this site, take a look at Google in general, or Bing, whatever you like to use, and look up these shortcuts. And just like all of your settings, you can find them in your respective directory. If this is too difficult, complicated to read, just do a search for this file itself. And that's about it. So learn all these and learn all the Illustrator. And this is the final video, so thanks for watching. Make sure you watch each one at least 15 more times, 16.